The water was gone, not running low, not rationed, gone. 3 men stood at the edge of the same desert, the same burning, merciless stretch of rock and silence that had already swallowed entire cavalry units, entire wagon trains, entire ambitions. 3 men, 3 nations, 3 completely different ideas about what it meant to survive. One of them would be dead within a week. One of them would find water by sunrise. And one of them, the one the others underestimated the most, would still be moving, still hunting, still breathing, 300 miles from here, 2 months from now. This isn't a story about who was the strongest. Strength doesn't survive the desert. This is a story about who was the smartest. The Sonoran Desert doesn't kill you dramatically. It doesn't announce itself. It just waits. It lets you exhaust your water, burn through your calories, make one wrong decision, and then it collects. Temperatures above 115 degrees Celsius. Terrain designed by geology to trap and confuse. No visible water for 100 miles in any direction. And yet for centuries, 3 distinct nations called this landscape, and the mountains above it and the plains beyond it, not a death sentence, but home. The Navajo, the Apache, the Comanche. To understand how they survived, you first have to understand something that most people miss entirely. Survival is not instinct, it's architecture. Imagine a man who can cross 40 miles of open desert carrying almost nothing. No canteen, no map, no compass. He knows something you don't. He knows something the US Army spent decades trying to figure out and never fully could. He knows where the water hides. The Apache didn't just find water. They had mapped it, not on paper but in memory, in oral tradition, passed down through generations with the precision of military intelligence. Hidden springs, seasonal pools inside canyon walls, the underside of certain rocks in the early morning, the roots of specific desert plants that held moisture like buried vessels. The barrel cactus alone could save your life, but only if you knew which ones to cut, how deep to cut, and how much to extract before the plant's natural toxins became your second problem. Most people who knew about barrel cactus died anyway. The Apache knew the difference, but water wasn't even their first priority. That's the part that surprises people. The Apache were masters of caloric conservation. Before they moved, they calculated. They didn't run when they could walk. They didn't walk when they could rest. They moved at night during summer heat, not because it felt comfortable, but because the math of survival demanded it. A body that moves in 110 degrees of heat burns through water reserves at nearly twice the rate of a body that moves at dawn. They didn't fight the desert, they negotiated with it. Their shelter was minimal, not because they couldn't build more, but because more was a liability. Every pound carried was a debt paid in sweat. Every structure built was a delay in movement. The Apache model of survival was built entirely around one principle. Never be where the enemy expects you to be, not even the desert. Mobility was their armor. Confusion was their fortress, and it worked. During the Apache Wars, one of the longest, most brutal guerrilla conflicts in North American history, the US military deployed thousands of soldiers, the most advanced cavalry force on the continent, against Apache bands that sometimes numbered fewer than 40 people. It took them 25 years to win. 25 years. Think about what that means. But here's where the story gets complicated. The Apache excelled at running, at vanishing, at movement as survival. The Navajo were doing something entirely different, and in some ways far more difficult. They were learning how to stay. The Colorado Plateau, Canyon de Chelly, the Four Corners region, these landscapes look stunning in photographs. In person, in summer, without modern technology, they are punishing beyond description. Sheer canyon walls that trap heat, altitude that brutalizes newcomers, soils so dry and nutrient-poor that most agricultural traditions would simply fail within the first season. The Navajo didn't fail, they evolved. Their agricultural system, what ethnobotanists now call desert-adapted polyculture, was a work of quiet genius. They planted in patterns designed not for maximum yield, but for maximum resilience. Corn, beans, and squash planted together, the legendary Three Sisters, but placed strategically at canyon bottoms where runoff water would collect, where shadows from rock walls would reduce evaporation, where the microclimate created a survivable margin in an otherwise unsurvivable zone. They didn't need rain to be consistent, they needed to be smarter than rain. They also understood something profound about protein scarcity. In an environment where large game was irregular and hunting expeditions costly in energy and risk, the Navajo developed an intricate knowledge of insects, seeds, and plant proteins that could sustain a family for months without a single successful hunt. Pinyon, pine seeds, dried sumac berries, roasted grasshoppers, certain species of caterpillar. That last one usually gets a reaction, but here's the reality. Gram for gram, dried insects carry more protein than beef. The Navajo didn't need modern nutrition science to know this. They had 500 years of empirical evidence. The deeper you look at Navajo survival strategy, the more it starts to look less like primitive adaptation and more like systems engineering, water management, soil management, caloric management. Social structure optimized for collective survival in isolated terrain. And when the long walk came, when the US government forcibly relocated the Navajo people 300 miles to an internment camp at Bosque Redondo in 1864, they survived that, too, against starvation, against disease, against deliberate deprivation. They survived it because endurance wasn't a choice. It was a technology. Now forget everything you just learned. Because the Comanche operated on entirely different physics. No desert, no canyon, no shelter carved from rock, just grass, sky, wind, and horses. The southern plains of North America, what is now Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, look open and simple from a distance. They are neither. They are a system of ecological traps, sudden storms that materialize in minutes, temperature swings of 60 degrees in a single day, grass that conceals rattlesnakes and sinkholes, rivers that flood without warning and dry without notice. The Comanche didn't just adapt to this environment, they weaponized it. Their survival strategy was built around one transformative technology, the horse. Not just riding, anyone could ride. The Comanche rebuilt their entire civilization around equestrian mastery so complete that European and American observers described it with language usually reserved for mythology. A Comanche warrior could hang off the side of his horse at full gallop, body nearly horizontal, using the animal as a shield, and fire arrows with lethal accuracy underneath the horse's neck. Think about the physics of that. Think about the years of training encoded in that single act. But horses were more than weapons. They were the survival system itself. A Comanche band could cover 60 to 70 miles in a single day, a distance that would take a US infantry unit 4 or 5 days to match. This wasn't just military advantage. It was the ability to follow the bison herds with precision, to move away from drought before it became critical, to relocate entire villages in hours when the weather turned dangerous. Speed was their water supply, speed was their food source, speed was their fortress, and their knowledge of the bison was encyclopedic. Every part of the animal had a function. The stomach lining became a water container, the bones became tools, the hide became shelter, clothing, and trade currency. The organs, liver, kidney, brain, were eaten raw immediately after a kill, because the Comanche understood instinctively what modern nutrition science confirms. Cooking destroys certain vital nutrients that a body under extreme physical stress cannot afford to lose. They ate the bison's blood mixed with its stomach contents, a gruesome act by most cultural standards, but one that delivered critical vitamins, probiotics, and hydration in a single act. Survival, again, as architecture, not instinct. The Comanche also controlled something no other nation on the plains could match: information. Their network of scouts, messengers, and observers made them one of the most tactically aware civilizations in North America. They didn't just survive the plains, they administered them. At their peak, the Comanche controlled more territory than any European nation had ever held in the Americas, approximately 240,000 square miles. That wasn't territory they occupied. That was territory they managed. So who survived better? The question sounds simple. The answer is almost impossible. Because they weren't solving the same problem. The Apache were solving the problem of invisibility, how to persist in the face of overwhelming military force, in terrain that wanted you dead. Their survival was kinetic, distributed, and deliberately difficult to quantify. They moved in small groups. They cached supplies across hundreds of miles. They survived through decentralization. No central camp to destroy, no single leader to eliminate, no fixed position to starve out. The Navajo were solving the problem of permanence, how to build something that lasts in a place that doesn't want to sustain it. Their survival was architectural, agricultural, and social. It required investment, patience, and collective discipline. It was the most fragile of the three models, tied to specific land, specific seasons, specific relationships with the earth, and also, in some ways, the most sophisticated. The Comanche were solving the problem of dominance, how to not just survive an environment, but control it. Their model required constant movement, constant expansion, constant access to large game. It was the most powerful of the three systems under ideal conditions, and the most vulnerable to collapse when those conditions changed, when the bison herds were systematically destroyed, deliberately as US policy. The Comanche's survival architecture fell apart within a generation. The Apache, with no fixed resource to destroy, held out longer. The Navajo, rooted in land they had learned to manipulate over centuries, rebuilt. Different problems, different solutions, different costs. Modern survival instructors, the ones training special forces units, wilderness rescue teams, and emergency response personnel, still study these three traditions, not as history, as curriculum. The Apache water-finding techniques, reading geological formations, identifying specific plant species as moisture indicators, understanding the behavior of insects as a guide to hidden springs, are taught in SEER training. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. The Navajo agricultural model has influenced entire fields of sustainable agriculture, particularly in arid climate food security research. The concept of companion planting, the Three Sisters method, is now used in experimental farming across sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East. The Comanche philosophy of full resource utilization, the idea that nothing from a hunt should be wasted, that every part of an animal carries nutritional, material, or strategic value, has become a cornerstone of wilderness survival philosophy worldwide. These weren't primitive techniques waiting to be superseded. They were solutions that took centuries to develop, and that modern technology, in many environments, still hasn't improved upon. Here is what the desert teaches everyone eventually. The most dangerous thing in any survival situation is not dehydration. It's not starvation. It's not exposure. It's the assumption that your way of thinking is the right one. The Apache, the Navajo, and the Comanche each developed systems so well adapted to their specific environments that they looked, from the outside, like magic, like instinct, like something you were born into. But none of it was instinct. All of it was learned. All of it was tested. All of it was paid for with the lives of people who got it wrong before someone got it right. Every survival technique you've read about today was originally a mistake that someone survived, then refined, then taught, then passed down for generations until it became invisible, folded so deeply into daily life that it stopped looking like knowledge and started looking like nature. That's what the desert teaches, what the plains teach, what the canyon teaches. The most powerful kind of intelligence is the kind that looks effortless. The Comanche warrior, hanging off the side of his horse at 60 miles per hour, wasn't performing a miracle. He was executing 1,000 hours of practice in a moment that required it. The Apache scout, finding water in rock that looked bone dry, wasn't using a sixth sense. He was reading a language that his grandfather taught him before he could walk. The Navajo woman planting seeds in a canyon bottom wasn't following tradition mindlessly. She was deploying a system her ancestors spent 500 years debugging. 3 nations, 3 deserts, 3 answers to the same impossible question. How do you survive a world that wasn't built for you? You study it longer than it studies you. You move smarter than it moves. You remember more than it forgets. And when everything else is gone, the water, the bison, the land itself, you carry the knowledge forward, because the knowledge is the survival. It always was.